Hey guys, what's up? This will be the Model View Controller tutorial part 2, and this will be my third time trying to redo it because it's tough to explain this so that it's not too confusing and do it at the same time. So I'll try to slow down. Right now we have an undefined index, and the reason is because there's no URL up here. If I go to index, we want index to be our default page. So if there is no URL typed in, we just want it to be MVC, and really it goes to the index page. So there's a couple things we need to take care of. It's first this undefined index of URL, and that's happening because this get, there is no thing being passed. So we're going to do a ternary operator and say is set. So if get URL is set, we're going to get the URL. Otherwise, it's just null. And I'll uncomment the print r of URL, refresh. And here we have an error because there's no page defined. If you see, we're not getting anything here. So what I need to do is check if this is empty, and if it's empty, we're going to load the index controller. So if URL 0 empty, we'll say require controller slash index.php and controller equals new index. And what we want to do is return false. The reason we do that is so that all this other stuff doesn't execute. Save, refresh, and we're inside the index controller, which should be the same as that page. Cool. So with the index or without, it's just index. Cool, that's taken care of. And we can go ahead and close this little bootstrap after we uncomment that so it looks good. What we're going to do a little bit of is mess with the view. If we go to views, remember we have a header file, and I already put some stuff in here. And what we have is a style sheet. And I always type this wrong. I always put src, but this is supposed to be href. Link rel equals, I don't know why, I never remember this off the top of my head. Anyways, I need to make a folder for public css default.css, and remember this is just the header file that will be included on every page. So if I refresh view page source, that's not what I want. So it looks like I need to first create a view for the page we're on. So in the index one, I'm going to create a new PHP file and call this index. In the last tutorial we did this for error. Remember, error was our default thing. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Views, header, and footer for this one. So we're going to include a header, this file, and a footer. Let me create a footer, a new PHP file, call it footer, and end the div body HTML. So what's happening is when we compile a file, we have a header, which is this file, and it gives us this block of code, and then our content from PHP will be all in here for the most part. And at the end of our file, where the footer is, we close everything off. And I might want to do a div ID equals footer, just so. Okay. And I can close these up. And that looks right, index.php. Now the problem is if I am just right here, it's not really doing anything yet. We have to tell the index controller to render the default view. And we've already set up a command for that. If you remember, in libs of view, we have a public function to render a page. So what I'll do is go to index and get rid of this echo. And I got rid of the comments in a couple other ones. I just commented this out, if you remember from the last tutorial. So back in the index controller, what I'm going to say is this view render index, refresh, and now we have this. undefined property view message. I can get rid of this. There we go. This is the main page. Welcome. What if we go to this page? Still good. Cool. And what we got to do is make our little CSS files. And if we view the source, it was under public CSS default. So I'm going to make a new folder called public, and a new folder under public called CSS, and a new CSS file, and I'll call this just default. You can delete everything, and I'll just put in some simple colors here. Background will be silver. The header will say, oops, padding of 20 pixel, background gold. Content will have a background of white, and I kind of like that padding, 20 pixels. And then there was a footer. Let's make the background green. Okay, save that up. Doesn't need to be too fancy. Make sure I can click that and get to it. Looks good. And refresh. And now we have a CMS coming together that looks neat. So I'm going to make a couple new folders, one called JS, another called images, and for the JS I'm going to include jQuery, and to do that I'll go to jQuery, download, it's actually easier to download on the main page. There we go. So here's all this jQuery junk, and I'm going to create a new JavaScript file and call this jQuery. Copy all this, paste all of this. Now hit enter, and this is a big file. Just make sure that there's like not any errors, because sometimes your computer won't copy all of this if you select it, and you'll have some problems. So what I'm also going to do in the header is include jQuery. So script type equals text, script src equals public js jQuery.js. I think that'll work. So let's test it out with a function of alert1. Make sure it works. This is just jQuery. This is optional. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. Refresh. It's not working. Function script src. I guess maybe you still have to do type equals text JavaScript. Refresh. Nope. Public JS jQuery.js. Okay, let me just make sure I'm not having too many problems. I'm going to create another file and just call this custom.js, and new JavaScript file, custom, and I'll do it the old way, document.ready function. Okay, and alert1. See if that works. There we go. So I must have had an error in my JavaScript code or something I'm not paying attention to. So there's jQuery, and here's our header. What we could do is create a couple controllers, and in our header we could create a navigation. So I could say ahref equals, we have our index page. What else could we have? I guess about, login, about, refresh, and we'll have a couple of links that go to these pages, index, about, login, and we have our index page. Oh yeah, help page. Let's change this to help. Oops, save, refresh, help, good, and a login page. New PHP file called login. I'm just going to copy all this junk here, paste it in here. Difference is I really want to load a login index page for whatever reason. New folder in the view, and let's call this login. Oops, I did something wrong. Folder login. The file login are, oh, it's right here. That was weird. And then a new PHP file in here called index. And in the login index file, I'll just copy what I have, like say here. Login page. Login, we'll say we need to change the controller name to login. Refresh, login, there we go. Help. Help is missing the goods, so I'll create a new folder called help. Keep getting an error in NetBeans, I'm not sure why. I'll make another file called index for help and say this is the help, and inside the help controller, open this up. I can get rid of this. I can say this view render help index. Okay, refresh, help, login. Okay, now we have some pages to work with. Cool. Now what if we go to help/other? We lose our view kind of. Let's see, view page source, and this is trying to link to this page, but it can't find it because it thinks it's in there. So we have to go a directory down to get to it. Oops, that's all wrong too. I'm not going to focus on this right now, so I'll go ahead and go back. What we have to look at is we have some code duplication. Let me close everything, make it a little cleaner. If we look at index file, we're including the header and the footer all the time. Really, what we'd want to do is probably just have this included maybe when we call the render command, or give it an option. So in my views in the library, this here, what I could do is say require views/header.php and footer.php. And if I go back to index, I could get rid of this, and it looks like it's included it twice. So I could get rid of all of these. It'll get rid of a lot of that code duplication. Let's see, help, error, index has to get rid of it, login. So clean all those up. Close all documents, refresh, and there we have it. That looks good. And if we wanted the option to render something else, what you could really do is in your views object, we could pass a parameter and say again, I don't know, no include equals false. Boy, can't type very well today. So we'll check if no include equals true. Will only require this, else will require the goods. So basically what this does is by default it's going to require the header and the footer unless we say not to. So it's going to do the same thing if we refresh. But if I was in my index controller and I did a (1), refresh, and it just doesn't include stuff. That could be an option if you wanted, for whatever reason. There's a lot you could do here, and this isn't like set in stone. This is just giving you a general idea of how to structure something together. So obviously this isn't a final product. You should really go through and figure out ways to make not everything so concrete. For example, if you were to rename header or footer, you'd have to always change your view file What I'm going to do is create a directory called config, new folder called config, and in the config I'm going to make a new one. I'm going to call this one database. This is a new PHP file, by the way. I'm going to create a new file. I'll just call this paths, and I think I'll call this URL. This is going to be how we're going to get the working area of where we are in the... Okay, that didn't make any sense. What I'm trying to do is, remember how we went to help/other, and if I view the source, I need the absolute path to this. Sorry, the relative or the full path, whatever you want to call it. And to do that, I'm going to make a constant to say define URL of, and then where are we working? I'm working in workspace/MVC. Okay. And paths and database. Good. And what I'm going to do is, in my index file, I'm going to require config/paths.php, require config/database.php, and then down in my main header file of my views, I can use the constant that I created, remember, in paths, of URL. So in header, I'm going to say PHP echo URL, and don't put a slash there, because remember we have one on there. And I could put one here and here, refresh, and we have that working now because it's giving us the absolute path. See that? The only thing is you'll have to change that if you change where your thing is located, or you could automatically detect it, but I'm not going to mess with that. Okay, so we have a nice little layout. Now we can clean up some of the help file, help, and require help model. I can get rid of this, and what we're going to do is assign some stuff to the help view. So we have a help model here. What are we doing here? Help model. Let's say, for example, function blah, and return 10 plus 10. So if I wanted to call the blah in the help model, see, this is some very serious business logic. I'll say model blah, and I could say this view blah equals model blah, and inside of help, this is rendering what? Refresh. We have a problem because the construct is rendering all the time the same thing. So what we have to do is have a custom controller for the main page. So I'm going to call that function index, so that the constructor will not interfere with the default page we're going to call. So I'll go to error, and there will be an index page instead, or an index method to handle this stuff. Index page rats. Okay, and lastly was our little login page. Boom, boom, boom. Now stuff ain't gonna work just yet. So if I refresh, let me go to help, just nothing here. What I gotta do is change my bootstrap so that the default method it loads if none is called is the index. So I'll go ahead and do that. So libs bootstrap controller equals new index, and controller, call the index method, and let's try it with nothing. Okay, that works. And we have to do this for when we call our little thingy down here. So if is set URL, what if we go to help? Where are we? We include the file if it exists. We call that. Let's see if. Let me just see where I am. Echo 1. No. Echo 2. Where am I? Oh yeah. If URL's 2, if not controller URL 1. I wonder why that's not doing anything. Refresh. Oh, where should I put this? Else. So I want to call the index method if there is no URL 2. Okay, I see. This code's a little messy. Basically what I want to say is controller index, and if is set, run this. I'm going to return false so we don't call two methods. There. Refresh. There we go. Help. Other. Great, I broke other. View page source. What have I done? Is set URL 1. What happened if I did that? Okay. I've done some serious damage here. Help. Login index. And with none. Okay, that looks like it's working. The only issue I have is that this might be getting called every time. So I'm going to close everything but the bootstrap. Let me open up the index controller, and let me say echo inside index refresh index. Okay, and if I had another function inside here called details, this is just to test something out. Okay, the problem is that that index, this is always being called because my bootstrap isn't right. Down here, I'm just going to do an else statement, and I am not liking the way these. I really get bothered by this, but I'm trying to hurry through these tutorials. Index, and what if I went to details? There we go, and that works. Well, index help. Index. So one thing is these links, they keep building up if I were at details, and if I want to go back to index, if you look down right in this area when I hover over the link, it takes me to index/index, and that's not good. We need to clean up these, because now it's going to take me to a page that doesn't exist. So we need to go to the views header and bust out our little URL here. Boom, boom, boom. Back, refresh, and index. Let me try it again. Details, help. There we go. That fixes the links. So one issue we had that you might not have seen a minute ago, if I went to login/test, we have this fatal error, and what we want to do is make this go to an error controller, and to do that in our bootstrap, what I would do is check if the function or the method exists, and to do that we're going to do that in the calling methods area, and there's one called if method exists inside controller, and the name will be URL 1. Else refresh. So that didn't work exactly like I wanted. This area is kind of a sloppy mess, and I should break this apart maybe into a couple functions. And I don't want to waste too much time doing this. I'll fix it for the download code though, and I hope this tutorial helped you so far. Thanks for watching.